So, I support my clients with reconnecting to their authentic self. And I talk a lot about the disconnection that happens and when it happens, how it happens, and how we can come home. So, what even is the authentic self, and what does it mean to be disconnected from that? How do we get home? So, the authentic self is really who you are at the core, your true essence, your ability to be fully, authentically, unapologetically you, to fully express, to speak your truth, to feel your emotions freely and effortlessly, to be free from limiting beliefs that say that you're not good enough, you're unworthy, you're unlovable, to really be able to fully embrace the truth of who you are and live in alignment with that. Live in alignment with your values, live the life that you are destined to live, to be spending your days doing things that light you up. That's what it means for me to be connected to your authentic self, to be living authentically and unapologetically. And what tends to happen when we come into this world, especially those first 7 years of life and even into adolescence, we have different experiences that can fragment us and disconnect us from that authenticity. It's almost like we come in as this wholeness, and then all of a sudden, these experiences or these pieces of generational trauma and limiting beliefs are ingrained and passed down into our DNA, into our genes, and we become this fragmented version of ourselves. And that's when we have these different inner children that show up, and these limiting beliefs that show up, these recurring patterns that tend to keep us feeling stuck and not being able to, or struggling to be able to achieve what we truly desire. And some of these experiences can be so subtle that we're completely unaware of them and don't even realize it's a thing. We don't realize some of the traumas we're holding on to are traumas. Because really, trauma is what happens inside. Trauma is the disconnection from your authenticity. It could be a big T trauma where it's like this big event that can really shake you and cause some of those like PTSD symptoms, those flashbacks, nightmares, different things like that. But then there's also the little t trauma, which doesn't mean it's less impactful, but it's like these experiences that tend to happen like over a period of time, like a recurring thing that happens that really strengthens the neural pathways and further disconnects us from ourselves. And they can be experiences that, if you thought about it in this moment, we're like, well, that's not traumatic, that's not a big deal. But when you're a child and when you're that young and that sensitive, it is a big deal. And it's what we made that experience mean about us rather than the experience itself. And so I'm going to give an example, which is actually from Gabor Mate. And I really love this. And I know so many people that I've shared it with really resonate. And it really just helps to open our mind to experiences that maybe you had that created this disconnection. And so, if you were to think of a little girl, say 5 years old, she really wants this cookie. So, she's asking her mum for this cookie. It's just before dinner, and her mum says no. And so this little girl, she's like, I really want this cookie. And she starts to like get really angry and starts to demand this cookie. But her mother has experiences from her childhood where she grew up in a really angry, aggressive, abusive household. And so whenever anyone gets angry around her, she gets really triggered, she feels unsafe, and she shuts down and goes into her own coping mechanisms, protective mechanisms. And so what happens in this moment, she gets triggered and she says to her daughter, good little girls don't get angry. And in that moment, because she's yelling at her daughter and her heart is shut down, everything's shut down because she's in this triggered survival state because it's triggered her past experience of being in an unsafe environment. So when our survival brain gets activated, we shut down, and it shuts down our heart. And that love that freely flows to her daughter shuts down. And so the message her daughter receives isn't that good little girls don't get angry. It's that angry girls don't get loved, because in that moment she didn't feel her mother's love. And so now she feels unsafe to be angry or express her anger because she's not going to get loved. And we need love is a need. We require this connection, we require this, and when it's taken away, it's terrifying and it's traumatizing. And so we will actually start to shut down parts of ourselves that we feel will prevent us from getting this love, acceptance, belonging, from having our needs met. So that's what I mean by the disconnection from your authenticity, because feeling and expressing anger, grief, sadness, laughter, pleasure, joy, all of these things are natural expressions of the human experience. We all feel them, and it's natural to express them. But when we don't have the support and the space, and we're not held, and we're actually told in a way that it's wrong or it's bad or it's shameful to feel and express, we start to shut down that part of ourselves, and it gets pushed into the darkness, pushed under the rug, and it becomes like this shadow self. And then we find ourselves starting to almost attract situations that are triggering these parts of us that are unresolved, unintegrated, wounded in the darkness. And so, really, our triggers are helping us to become aware of what's unresolved, what's buried within. So often, when we experience a trigger, it's so overwhelming, it's so intense, it's not nice. It brings up a lot of stuff, and it can bring up a lot of shame, because we start to feel things that we learned were not okay to be felt. It wasn't okay to feel that anger. So now when it comes up and it starts to bubble or we get reactive, we tend to go into stories and shame ourselves and feel really wrong, feel unlovable, feel not good enough. And it strengthens these limiting beliefs that were created in this developmental stage of life. Some of these limiting beliefs and traumas were actually passed down generationally. They're embedded and ingrained within our caregivers and their caregivers, and it's actually passed down after generation after generation. And so a lot of this work we're doing, it's not just for us, it's for our lineage, it's for those who walked before us. And that's why it tends to be really challenging to release some of these. It's like, wow, I've done all this work and it's still here. Why is it still here? It's because it's not just one layer we're working with. We're going through the onion layer by layer by layer. And so it will take time, and it will take support. It will take the community. And that's why we don't do this alone. That's why we gravitate toward community and like minded people and coaches and mentors and different programs and things that can support us, because we're not designed to do this journey alone. But there is this conditioning around, I'm meant to do it alone, and if I can't, there's something wrong with me. So what I invite you to do is start to feel into, as I'm sharing, what is arising for you, what is resonating, what is the limiting belief that you're working to release or that you're noticing coming up for you. What is maybe the trauma that keeps showing up for you, or the emotion that you're struggling to express, the recurring pattern that you feel like powerless to get out of. What is present for you in this moment? Because what is present is what's ready for you to work with. It's coming up because it's ready to be released, it's ready to be integrated, it's ready to be felt. And by doing this, we start to integrate those wounds, we integrate those layers, and we reconnect to the parts of us that were pushed into the darkness, pushed into the shadows, and we bring them into the light. We embrace them, we love them, we take care of them, and we start to support the healing of that abandonment. Because what happened when we suppressed or pushed away that part of us, the part of us that was feeling angry, the part of us that doesn't feel good enough, the part of us that felt like I had to be perfect, the part of us that feels I'm unlovable, I'm never going to be worthy or good enough, or whatever it is for you. Maybe it's I always attract this type of partner, I always attract this kind of job or boss, or I'm no good with money. um, Lots of different beliefs and stories that we have and that we hold on to. And the more that we repeat these, whether we're consciously repeating them or unconsciously repeating them, it's strengthening those neural pathways and strengthening that reality. So if you're wanting to shift these, if you're wanting to reconnect to your authenticity and live the life you were designed to live, we've got to start to integrate these wounds and release these limiting beliefs and come home. But first, we do need to shine that light and become aware of what is here, what is at the core of this, and what is it that you truly want.